Hello everyone, Lisa is here and welcome to this very special part of my channel where we together with experts discuss everything related to innovations, breakthroughs, collaboration and co-creation, how to manage processes in collaboration projects, how to increase the chances of making a breakthrough, how to foster innovation and more. And today in this video I'm talking to Joaquin Prado. Joaquin has led standards development and implementation since 2003, beginning his career with the standards team at Vodafone UK. With his extensive experience spanning 2 decades, Joaquin has been a pivotal contributor to numerous global standards and industry organizations, including the Open Mobile Alliance, 3GPP, GSMA, IETF, Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, and the Linux Foundation. He's focused on driving continuous process improvement and advancing automation tools, enhancing efficiency and delivering impactful results. Joaquin is a co-founder of Standards Hub, a specialized professional services boutique where he provides tailored, knowledge-based solutions to standards organizations, guiding them through the entire process, through the entire life cycle, from formation to publication and adoption. His commitment to excellence and innovation has made him a respected professional in the standards community. I met Joaquin many years ago, and I know him as a truly passionate expert who cares about improving the area of standards development. I'm very happy I had a chance to have this interview with him. And as you might have guessed, we are talking about standards development organizations today. I hope you will enjoy watching our conversation and find it useful. Hello, Joaquin. It's so nice to have you here today, and thank you so much for agreeing to have this interview with me.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for the invitation. I'm happy to be here and share with you, some of my experience and knowledge in the standards arena.
Yeah, that would be amazing. That would be an amazing discussion. I'm pretty sure about that. And I'm really looking forward to hear your opinion about all these different topics and all these different questions that I prepared for you. But I think before we dive into this topic of standards development organizations, I want to just quickly talk about your background, your experience, where you're currently working.
So yeah, well, my name is Joaquin Prado. Originally from Spain. I live quite a few years in the UK, where I have the opportunity to work for companies like Vodafone, and that is where I started my standards, first steps. And in Vodafone, I work in different organizations. And at one point, I decided to leave Vodafone and join, at that time, an organization called Open Mobile Alliance. I joined as a test manager, and then over the years, I developed a different grow within the organization, project manager, program manager, technical director, and right at the end, back in 2019, the person that was at that time my boss and myself, we decided to create an organization called a company called Standards Hub, and now we provide services to standards organizations from formation, establishing, onboarding of new members, development of specifications, reach the market and publication, and even sunset as well. So we cover the whole life cycle of an standards organization. And right now I'm working as a part-time for the Linux Foundation. They have a branch which is the Joint Development Foundation, is the standard side. And at the same time, as part of the Standards Hub, we have our own customers that we provide services similar as the ones we provide for the Linux Foundation, but in a more freestyle and with different type of tooling and services that we can talk later. So yeah, I have been in the standards probably more than I will recognize. I didn't have the white hair when I started, and so that's long time ago. But it has been a really good journey, and at the same time, like everything in life, you can see how the technology and the approach to standards has changed over the years. Quite interesting. And we are approaching now challenging times, but at the same time, great opportunities as well.
Yeah, and we will talk about these opportunities later, definitely. But I want to start with an overview of standards development organizations, like what they do, what their main goal is, and what their role in the innovation process is as well.
Yeah. So standards organizations, they can come together for different reasons. And normally is when the industry realize there is a market that in order to formalize the market and make it a big size, they need some kind of collaboration with other companies in order to define I will say technologies that they are not the ones they are going to make really a difference, but they are basic and needed in order to reach that market. I always compare the standards organizations with the rail track of in the transportation of the trains and the ferrocarrils, where you want to if you want to establish commerce between two cities, and imagine that each of the large companies in both cities, they decide to create their own transportation by trains, and they go and create their own rail track. So each company creating their own rail track in order to get goods from one place to the other, it doesn't scale. It will be a waste of resources. So all of them come together, define the rail track that is going to be able to support the different type of services they want to have: passengers, cargo, high speed, leisuring, anything that they want. So what's happening is that the rail track in itself, no one is going to sell it, but the services that you put on top of that rail track is the one is going to do the difference for the market as well for the companies. So standards is created for things like problems with interoperability. There are different applications in the market. They don't talk to each other. You need an standards to establish how to communicate. As I mentioned, you want to create a market. In that case, how to reach the market, sometimes you need to establish some kind of basic technology. And other times, and the most important is when there is a community. There is a community that has pain points, and you try to resolve the pain points from the community. But obviously, it's not you as a company, it's other companies as well. And in that case, when you have multiple companies serving a community, you say, okay, what are the pain points of that community, and how we can all collaborate together to get us to that community, and then we can differentiate ourselves. Because innovation standards is enable innovation, but we should not standardize innovation. In that case, you kill everything.
Yeah. But in general, like developing a standard is quite a complex process itself, right? And it takes quite some time. But can you get us through this process of developing the standard?
Yeah, you are right. When you bring different companies, sometimes competitors, or sometimes they have their own customers as colleagues in these organizations, it can be very challenging. So the first thing, as I always say, is when you bring on a standards, is you need to establish some kind of rules of engagement, how you are going to collaborate. And in the standards, there are 4 principles. They are basic to everything that we do, and people doesn't realize, but it touch really everything that we do. And it's things like impartiality. An standards organization has to be impartial. You cannot give preference to one group above another group. It has to be open. Anyone can join. It's true that sometimes there is some payments to do, but you don't restrict access unless there are some restrictions imposed by the governments. That is happening right now, at least in the United States and in Europe as well. The other thing you have is you have this impartiality, transparency. Transparency is that everyone understands the rules of how we are going to work, and there is no hidden agendas from the organization point of view, that some groups they are not aware of what is happening, or someone is cooking the specifications in one side and then bringing across. Transparency is really important, so everyone understand what is happening at any time. And the other thing, the fourth one, it will be consensus. How to reach consensus. People think that consensus is all about that everyone agree, and that's not the case. Consensus is that everyone has the possibility, the option to voice their views. And sometimes it could be, and I have seen this in multiple cases, where one company or a group of companies disagree with whatever the organization or the group wants to, technically wants to move forward. But despite of that, they disagree. They say, I disagree with this. I don't think this is the right direction. But for the good of the community, I'm going to let it go. So it means that the consensus is reached by say, I told you that this is not a good idea. I would like to make sure that this is being recorded, but I'm not going to oppose to these particular changes. And that is the meaning when you have an organization which is mature, is where you happen this kind of things happening. People disagree, but still goes with the majority because that is how you build an standards. As I always say, a standards is you have a good standards with everyone is evenly unhappy. Everyone think that the standards is not covering everything that they want. When you have that, you have a good standards. Because the standards at the end of the day is what you build is the minimum common denominator across everyone that is in the, representing in that particular group or particular standards. So it's challenging and is all set up around rules of engagement. And once people understand that and follow very few, very basic rules, things move forward much more smoothly that if there is no control in terms of the rules of someone is trying to influence things over other groups, that is chaotic and normally it doesn't work in the long run.
Yeah, but with all those rules, like, do you see that companies often really follow them, or I'm pretty sure some of them are trying to break those rules and just follow their own way?
Absolutely. We are humans, so we don't like rules. And especially when nowadays more, where companies, they send their delegates, they say, okay, you have 5%, 10% of your time dedicated to this. That person goes there with the requirements from the company, and the company say, I want these requirements in the specifications. Well, you have imagine another 20 people going to the same meeting exactly with the same mandate, and those requirements are different. So in that case, who's going to win? And that is where I say that first to recognize that when you go to a standards organization, you are not working in your company with other departments, with the head of the department say, guys, we are going to do this, we go in this direction, and all departments work and collaborate on that. You go to an organization, you may talk to your customers, to your competitors, to other different stakeholders, which have a very different view from the view that you have. Maybe they go there because they want to learn. They go there because they have already a solution they want to implement in the standards. They go there because they are already a market leader and any standard is not going to be any good for them. And they go to try to slow down or derail the whole idea, or they go there because genuine they believe that is through collaboration how they reach that market and elaborate. All of these things can happen in a small group, and how you organize all of that is where the maturity I was referring before. Normally you don't have that natural thing that 5 people 20 people come together and naturally they have that dynamic. Normally you need to have a figure of coordinator that establish, okay, this is the rules. That coordinator doesn't have any really interest in particular one type or the other. It's just the pure coordination of the group and move forward as a group. And that is the reason why a lot of organizations they seek companies like ourselves to provide that type of coordination and assistance, because the members that are coming and attending these events are voluntary. They don't have all the time to try to organize to talk with the competitors about something that they want is against their interest. You need a more impartial um, person on there, which establishing rules that help the organization to build that consensus. And all of this, and this is the trick, is to build trust. So everything, in order to bring these organizations that, as you pointed out, is very difficult, you need to build trust, and trust takes time to build. And that is where you come with the four basic principles of standards, transparency, impartiality, openness, and consensus. And you start building processes around that people may find in red tape, but when you are working in this environment with very different interests and intentions, you need that type of ruling. It's a rules of engagement, how to collaborate, how one of the most important things in any standards meeting is the agenda. The agenda is the one it dictate what we are going to discuss. Potentially can dictate as well how much time we are going to dedicate to each topic. And when you have 10, 5, 40, 60 people coming together, it's very easy to don't follow the agenda. Someone talk about this and the topic goes up there, and then you ending topic on other things. You need someone there which say, okay, this is the agenda, and let's go through this agenda. Let's go to give the chance to everyone to present those documents. And at the same time, the discussion has to be done constructive in order to progress, to understand, to clarify any misunderstandings and lack of knowledge sometimes or different views, and then slowly coming into consensus. So it's challenging, and normally organizations by themselves, they find it very difficult that they try to organize themselves unless they find someone they can be neutral and it can use these techniques and tools and processes in order to bring everyone together.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I agree with you. Like, and once you establish those rules, and once there is a person who is kind of following the process and coordinating it, it's so much easier. But okay, so we have the coordinator and we have these members. But how does the process itself of developing a standard looks like? Because I remember you showed me this diagram with all these different steps of how it happens. Could you please
Yeah,
tell us about this?
yeah, and that is one of the things that sometimes when you start bringing diagrams to these discussions, people say, "Oh, red tape," no. I have these 5 or 6 requirements. I want to just insert it in the specifications. It doesn't work, and people say you are building the specifications, someone is providing scope or content that is out of the scope, or someone is already talking about some certification. So all this discussion needs to happen in some kind of order. So the first thing that you have, the life cycle of any specifications, start with the work item. The work item is where you build the scope, you build the concept, what we are going to do. And from what we are going to do, you already create a selection of very few things that you want to do. That is the status or the scope. The scope is where you define for version 1.0 of these specifications, we are going to touch these 3 areas. And inside of these 3 areas, we are going to have, it depends of obviously what you're doing, but some kind of functionality. And at this level is a very high level. From the business point of view, we want to have the ability to transfer information from this point to this point following this particular path or whatever is needed at that point. So that is the work item creation, where you scope the work you're going to do. Once you have that, you move into the development. And the development, the first thing is you need to do normally is if those scope that you have defined, you need to now derive some specific business cases. The business cases, the best way to representing is to using use cases. In some cases, there is no need for a use case because it's very clear. But if someone can with some kind of ideas that is not very really good understood by the group, in that case, it's recommendable to have a use case where you define the different stakeholders, you define the preconditions, the post conditions, and what is exactly is going to happen. Now people has an understanding what you are aiming to. From those use cases, you derive requirements, but these requirements are in this case are very high level requirements. So you say, I need to have some security, I need to have some I don't know, the ability to do some kind of updates remotely, whatever is needed in the specifications. And that is a list of requirements that later you go and say, okay, now I have all these requirements. I have an idea of what we try to build. The next step, it will be, let's go to put an architect in place. For engineers, it's always, boxes with lines. It's this box represents whatever functionality you want, and this represents another functionality, and we have an interface. We need to exchange information. So now you have the ability to communicate to the group, we want to build this type of scope. We have these high level requirements, and we have this architect diagram. And now is when you start building the little things, the granularity, exactly how that boxes they are going to, what are the components of topological components or physical components or logical components, and what are the functionality they are going to have and how to exchange. So now you have developing the specifications, and eventually go to the point we say, okay, we target 1.0 release with this particular scope. We have built already our architecture, we have all our functionality, and we have developed all the statements that we want. We think it's complete. And the next step is, let's go to review it. Because normally, what I describe in 2 minutes takes a year and a half. So that specification has been built over that period of time using different tone, different approaches. And now someone needs to go through all of that and say, okay, is this making sense? Is this has some continuity, some flow? Is written exactly in the same way? We are not lefting anything behind, or there is no open for interpretation. That is what we call consistency review, where we review the final specifications. During that period of time, you do not expect someone come along and say, I have a fantastic, new idea that I want to insert in these specifications at the last minute. That is catastrophic. That is the reason why we define a scope, we close the scope, and we build those requirements around the scope. At that point, we should not allow anyone to come with this great idea. And you will be surprised the number of times that these things happen. That you are literally discussing the final, consistency of the specifications, and they are still disputing that some new requirements should be added. And you say, guys, that's a recipe for a disaster. So it's that to take the group to work in that level and understanding at different stages you do different things is important. So once you complete that review analysis, you say, okay, this makes sense, is written in the same tone, there is no open for interpretation, we remove all the debuggings, or all the bugs that we have, and things like that. Then normally in some organizations it comes as, okay, now let's go to check for the what we call the IPR review, intellectual property review, which is anyone claiming any patent, any property rights on this? And if they do, under what circumstances they are going to release that to the rest of the group and to the community. That is really important. So you want to make sure that you understand if anyone is going to make any claims, how those claims are going to be released to the community. Nowadays, with open standards, those claims tends to be royalty free. So you give it to the community for free. If someone after a year and a half make a claim the last minute, they have a patent, they are not prepared to let it go for free, imagine what is the reaction of the group. It's going to be upset. So in some cases, they go and they carve that content out of the specifications by providing an alternative, which is free. So, and that is understanding this process and the implications of some of the actions is important, because you can derail the whole process at the end. So now that you have done the scope, develop the requirements, build the architecture as well as the technical specifications, done the reviews for consistency and for IP, now you go for approval, formal approval of those specifications among the group that have done the work. And that is not the end. Now you need to send it to the parent body to say, we have completed this work, we have followed the process that we have, and we want you to ratify this at the higher level, which normally is the board level or the steering committee level. And that is the parent group that oversees the operations or the direction of the organization. And they say, okay, now we ratify these specifications that has been developed for a year and a half. Our groups, they have been contributing. We know that we have the right licenses, and we are aware we are releasing this to the market with the intention to promote it and to, address the pain points in the community. Now at that point you have the ratification and the publication. So all the process, which is work item, development, reviews, approval by the group that is developing the specifications, ratification by the parent group, and publication is done by any organization. And if they do it in this fashion, which is with order and with process, they will be more successful. If they try to do it, as I mentioned before, right at the end, when everything is done, someone go and insert a new requirements, or they make a claim in the last minute of a patent. All of that is a recipe for a disaster, and unfortunately, some organizations they work like that, and they tend to have a really hard time. Other organizations are very well run and understand all these stage and processes and build, the tools, the consensus, the process, everything they need to help the organization to move from stage to stage. So it's like everything in life. Nowadays, everything is always very detailed. You have process for everything. And if you follow the process, especially when you go with a group of other companies, they are competitors and customers and different stakeholders, you need that level of organization. Because in that case, everyone knows, okay, I understand where they are now. And I know that at this point, the only thing I can do is, if they are in the consistency review, is I didn't participate in any of the previous discussions, but let me see if I understand what they built. And I'm not going to try to insert a new requirement at this stage, because it's not going to work.
Yeah, it's going to be a never-ending process, I guess.
And then, people say sometimes they complain, this is too rigid, and why we do it in this way, why we have tracking every single requirement has been submitted by companies. If you go to the courthouse, it's full of cases where things went wrong, and the companies go and make a case. So you don't want to go to the courthouse. You don't want to be involved in any patent litigation or any problem or antitrust or anything like that. You want to make sure that the process has been done in a way that there is no process violation, and is done in a way that all the ticks has been, all the marks has been ticked, and everything is correct as it should be.
And I completely agree that a well-structured process, it definitely helps to reduce the risks and reduce the number of difficulties on the way and the challenges.
Yeah, this is one of the cases where the fastest point between two, or the fastest way between 2 points, is not necessarily a direct line. You need to go through certain process, because you are working with other people. They have different views from the views of your company, and to reach that, it takes time. But once you reach that standards, and it's a good standards, is addressing the problem of the industry, you have a much better position in order to address the problems in the industry and keep evolving that standard.
Yeah, I agree. Another thing that I want to talk about, it's a bit sensitive maybe, but the government, because of course, when we're talking about standards, most likely you will see players from the industry, but is the government involved in the process in general when it comes to developing standards?
I will say it depends. It depends. The government has different ways to influence things, and this through regulation. And when they establish that regulation of certain industries, in that case, the industry now, they need to address those regulations. And normally, the regulations comes with some kind of standards on that, especially for security and things like that. So the government normally will participate in the standards when it's a public interest, where sometimes the companies may not be in their interest to do things a certain way, and it happens especially in Europe with the European Union. where they have the customer at the center of things, and they realize that there is a waste of in the industry, and then they decide to standardize something around that. And companies by themselves may not necessarily do it because they see an opportunity. And this is the charging of the mobile phones is one of the cases where in Europe they say, okay, that's it. We impose this level of standard for the charging of mobile phones, and that is going to avoid waste. And the customer, in a way, as you know, each time you buy a phone, you have to change your cables, which is a waste of resources and a cost that is unnecessarily. So it depends. And as I say, they can sometimes influence the standards through regulation. In very few cases, I have seen the government representing the standards, but sometimes they do. They have normally problems in order to sign some of the agreements in relation to especially to the APR and things like that. But yeah, you have different countries, they do it differently, And if you can see, USA is more about leave the industry to figure out things and make it agreements. In Europe is more about regulation. And in that case is where the European Union established some directives that companies they need to follow, and the standards are part of that. And in Asia, specifically in China, is probably more related with the government dictating how the technological changes should be happening. No one of them is a bad thing. I think it's a combination. Sometimes what it helps. In general, I think it's a good thing to have, obviously, the government influencing things.
But when it comes to involving government, I don't know, like if you had such cases in your experience, but is it easier to find this consensus with the government or with the industry players? Who's more flexible here?
Uh, Normally, the association when they come together tends to be more flexible. The government normally goes for regulation, and you are in or you're out. The industry normally establishes some kind of we call certification. No one likes certification because it means that they put a level that you need to, at least to a threshold that you need to meet, and that is normally something that people normally they are reacting against that, especially if the market is being established already. That creates a lot of challenges. And I'm I have been involved in some of these organizations where they try to establish a standards in a well-established market, and it's really painful. There are ways on how to do it. People sometimes they tend to be, or companies they tend to be very aggressive in order to do it very quickly. It doesn't work. Sometimes companies they are really reluctant, and in that case they will be holding back and finding any excuse to derail the whole operation. So it tends to be very, very challenging when you talk about conformance. But as I say, I think it depends the topic we are discussing, and sometimes the government they normally establish through regulation to meet certain standards, and in other cases the industry comes together and they set their own standards, and they realize that in order to make sure that that market is formalized and they can tempt into the market, they establish some kind of certification, because the certification means this is the threshold that you need to meet in order to get to the market. And in general things work. Sometimes takes time, and we get there because there are being pains in the process that they say the industry, okay, enough is enough. Let's go to bring interoperability, and let's go to put ourselves a benchmark. And for that, you don't need the government.
Yeah, that's true. You also mentioned some differences between different continents, but which countries are the leaders when it comes to standards development? Is there such thing as being a leading country in standards?
I think it's difficult to say. It probably depends of the different technologies. In general, you have a lot of innovation going in United States, and as a result of the innovation, the industry they realize that okay, for us to deploy all these services and these functions that we have, there is an area that you cannot commercialize, there is no value, but we need it. That is the rail track I explained before. And in that case, the industry come together and say, okay, let's go to define these specifications, this functionality, these protocols. They help us to get to the market, and there is not too much value to do it. Otherwise, each company will have to do it independently, and then you have the problem of interoperability at the end. So in that aspect, United States has been probably leader on that, in that level of innovation in general, especially in the digital. Europe is more about regulation, and there are really successful standards created in Europe, in the telco industry with the 3GPP. That is the ones they trigger all the development of the current telco networks. And they are being, in some cases, supported. There are grants by the European Union that support some of the organizations. They are doing these specifications, and it's been quite successful. So I guess it depends. Now, things are changing in the sense that normally you will find companies on both sides of, in any part of the world that they want to reach that market, and then now they need to collaborate. So in a lot of the organizations I support, we have companies and representatives from North America, Europe, and Asia. And that the governments, in that case, they do not participate, and it's only just about the companies coming together. Sometimes those standards they are being developed by these organizations are being taken to the International Standards Organization, so it's ISO track, which is going to be endorsed and implemented by the states. So that is another route. You start with the private initiative and then eventually go into an international standards adopted by all the states, all the countries. So there are different things. I don't think it's personally. I've been working in Europe and now I work in the United States, and it's true there are in general different approach to standards and different approach to work. But nowadays we are more, we live in the digital time and everything is pretty much in real time, and the differences is slowly are disappearing in my view.
Yeah, and personally, I do believe it's great. I really think that this is something that we need to kind of unite and
Yeah,
all the different countries, all the different companies together.
yeah. The problems that we have now they are common problems.
Yeah,
So we need to find solutions among all the players.
yeah, yeah, I agree. So we were talking about these collaboration challenges when we have basically different companies, and sometimes they are competitors. But there is another challenge, very important challenge for standards development organizations, and this challenge is connected to funding, to money to develop these standards. Yeah,
It's
everyone needs money.
everything is money at the end of the day.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. But how do organizations usually solve such a problem?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, Normally, the organizations when they come together, they started with say, okay, say 3 or 4 companies come together, they identify a problem, they collaborate, they say we need to build something together. And at the beginning, they say, okay, let me bring you normally a program manager, one of the organizations, or all of them bring someone that's going to collaborate, and that works to a certain extent. Why to a certain extent? Because first, those representatives, they are from one company. So they represent an interest from one company that is very difficult for the other ones to see as an impartial. And in that case, if the organization wants to grow, and normally they have this maintain this type of organizations or create these organizations takes a lot of effort, they realize, well, we need some assistance here. We need a third party that is going to help us and is neutral. Straight away you need funding, and now you say, okay, we need funding, how we are going to do this. And organizations normally they establish at least 3 different type of fundings. You have the founders that they normally put more money into the organization. Then you have an intermediate companies, they have an interest but they don't want to be a funding, member, or they arrive too late to be a founding member, but they still have an interest and they want to somehow influence the technical solutions of that organization. And in that case, they say, I go for this second tier membership. And then you have another third normally membership, which say, well, I want to collaborate, I have the time, but we are a small company, we cannot pay a lot of money. And some organizations, they say, okay, we create a third tier for companies that they want to collaborate. It could be free or could be just, a small amount of dues. And normally what they form is that 3 different tiers, and they say each tier is going to pay a certain amount of money. And we say we need about, these organizations, they can function. It depends, but obviously when we are talking a sustainable thing during the year where you have support from third parties like us, you will need between 150,000 to 250,000 dues that you need to collect. And in that case, on those tiers, they organize in such a way, they say, well, those they have more influence in the direction of the organization, they are going to pay more. And they have a seat in the board of directors or the steering committee. Those they pay less, they don't have a seat normally in the board of directors, or they can be granted a seat, but only to a certain number of the tier 2, and they still have a vote, but it's only a small proportion compared with the founders. And then you have the contributors at the end that they may pay a little bit, and they cannot sit down in the at the board meeting to make decisions, but they can contribute and they can still make technical decisions on things. So you need the funding from the members. They come together and put some dues, and that is normally sustainable year after year. It's quite normal in organizations, so they have payments I have seen from $6,000 to $1 million. It depends. Yeah, it's some of the organizations to be part in the board of directors that is what it costs. And other organizations, they say, well, this tier is free and we only pay at the funders level, we pay 100,000, 20,000, 12,000. It depends what the organization wants to achieve and how they want to be structured. And now that money allows you to go and buy services from third party, like ourselves, for example. We are neutral. Our commitment is to the success of what the organization wants to do. And we dedicate our time and efforts and understanding and knowledge and tooling, to help them to get there. As I say, some of them, they try to organize themselves at the beginning and eventually hit a point where they say, okay, this doesn't work anymore. It requires more time. There is no experience or the tooling is not correct. Some companies, they see the influence of one company about the other ones. They don't like it. And in that case is look for the funding and have enough money, collect enough money from the members, from the tiers, in order to give you a budget that will allow you to have some kind of program management, some marketing, in order to outreach to your community. Other organizations, they get a grant from the government. And if they get a grant of the government, my advice is always establish, nevertheless, your own membership tiers. The money from the government is to be dedicated, and it's the government is going to make sure that you dedicate the money correctly. So they are going to audit the money they send you, and anyone that's going to participate should be not only engaging by putting time, but as well by costing some money. Anything is free, we tend to take it always very lightly, and my advice will be always set your membership levels and collect the money. Some organizations, they keep like a group, a group of friends working together. It could work. I have seen some of them working over the years, but it's a very well established type of business or type of technology. There are a few friends that they are coming together, or they becoming friends after a few years. They have a genuine technical interest on that, and they are prepared to put their own time and effort. And in that case, they work with a very little budget or no budget at all. But you will find that through 2, 3, 4 individuals in that organization, they will be carrying 90% of the work on their own personal time.
Yeah.
And that is the reason why funding is important and is based on what the objectives that the organization has. The funding has to be, aligned with that. If you want to reach out different markets and you have the impact of your specifications are going to be large, you probably need bigger membership levels or dues for the membership levels, and you will need you will attract big companies, and for the big companies, they obviously you need to justify the cost of belong to the organization. So it's funding is always challenging.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But yeah, very interesting. And you named basically a couple of approaches to deal with this. But are there any other challenges apart from collaboration, apart from funding, that standards development organizations have?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's. I always say that standards is not about the technology; it's about people, and we discussed already about those challenges. But the other thing as well is that is tooling. Tooling nowadays we aiming to work for in a synchronous way. If an organization only is able to move forward and to make agreements when with their meeting, that is going to be very challenging because normally you have meetings. It depends once a week, some organizations once a day, once a month. And if you only move the needle during those meetings, it's going to take time because you need to overcome the different views, the different even understanding of on the same topics. So tooling for collaboration and building specifications is nowadays very challenging. Companies are used to things like, oh, we use Microsoft Teams, we use Google workspaces. Let's go to do that. Well, you will find challenges when you come in together and in a group of 20 companies to work together and using Microsoft Teams or Google or other tools. Why? A plethora of different things. You will find companies that they have a policy they cannot use Google workspaces, they cannot use Google Hangouts. So all of that, what's happening is that to collaborate make it very difficult. Then the other thing in standards is that it's very important that we know who is submitting what pieces of information into the technical specifications, because this is from the point of view of IPR. And you need to have a system that is, in a way, can tell you with the timeline how things has been built. So tooling for collaboration is a challenge. The industry has resolved this for the developers. They have used GitHub, which is basically a version control for text with a bunch of different features. They helped collaboration, and specifically the case for the developers, help them to build their own development environments and things like that, and validating and tracking and things. So standards organization nowadays, they are using more and more GitHub, but people is reluctant they understand GitHub as something for developers, not for them. They get scared or are unfamiliar with things like a command line where you interact commands to manipulate information. If they write the language, it's not necessarily plain text, is what we call markdown language, which is like a plain text, but with some symbols around the words that when it's read by a browser, interpret it differently and provide rich text out of that. All of that normally, specifically for people that has been working on standards for long, they look at that and say, no, this is not for me. I don't like these tools. And they go to other tools that are not well prepared for version control. And then you are ending with problems of access. Who has access to this? I'm working with 20 people and I have this document I'm going to produce. I go to my Google Works, Google Workspace, I create a document and I share it with the other 20 companies. Okay, how are you going to share that? So the sharing, it should be centralized. It should be the organization has a workspace where everyone now has access rights to get to that information. Some organizations, they say, well, in order for you to get here, you need to sign these other documents. And if you don't sign this document, you may be able to go into this group, but you may not be able to go into this group because you have not signed the charter for this particular group. All of this create massive problems. If companies and organizations are not aware about that, they can end with problems down the line. So tooling is challenging. There is nothing in the industry right now that provide a solution to everyone. More advanced organizations and people that are used to with GitHub, they work very well in GitHub because it creates the environment that you need, but it needs some kind of understanding of Git commands, GitHub interface, markdown languages, and then now you're ending with a document that is stored in GitHub, and when you take it, you cannot take it. You need tools to go there and elaborate. All of that is solved nowadays, but it requires tools, process, access, and all of that. And there is no a single tool right now on the market that resolve all these problems. And I have seen organizations going around the clock, for a year, start with say, guys, how you're going to collaborate together. And they try all the different things. They go around. A year later, they still have the same problem. And is a real issue.
Yeah.
On top of that, you have now, as we said before, rich consensus and agreements between companies with different views and intentions in an environment where there is a lot of challenges because the standards tends to be slow. The market cannot wait for the standards. And by the time the standards get into the market is already established, and now is fragmentation, is interoperability issues, all of that. So the key is to develop a standards that is exactly addressing the pain points of the industry, to do it collaborative and quickly. And in order to do that, you need to align a lot of different pieces in place. Process is one, how to reach consensus together is another one, using the right tooling is another one. And if you have all of that in place, even having all this in place, you may find companies, they go there just to derail the whole thing. And that happens, and it's okay. Your process, your organization has to be mature enough to be able to cope with that without major disruption. And I have seen organizations, they do it very well. And in that case, companies very quickly realize that there is nothing to disrupt because the process will follow its, steps, and nothing major is going to happen. All the companies, they totally, if they are not well organized, they cannot move forward.
So, but as you are talking about like tools for standards development organizations, let's maybe cover the topic of AI and how does AI influence standards development organizations?
Yes, I'm amazed at what's happening with AI. I've been using AI for the last year and a half, especially the last year, and it's mind blowing. I mean, anyone I have on purpose to say, okay, I want to all my work to see how it can be assisted with AI, and it can be. And if you use it rightly, it can help you to some of the issues that we mentioned before. And it's something that is going to happen not only in the standards, but across the board. The train of the AI has left the station already. So this is happening, and we need to adapt to that. And for the standards, it's helping in a lot of different areas. I can give you examples of things like meeting minutes. You can do nowadays meeting minutes using AI tools in a way that takes a fraction of the effort and is much better content as a result of that. And meeting minutes are much better, more detailed. Nowadays, in general, we need to have this process, this regulation. No one read those documents, but anyone could go and interrogate, say, I have this situation, I want to achieve this in this particular organization, how I can do it. And AI can assist you with that. If we go to the technology that we are developing, it can assist us to critique that technology based in previous technologies we have developed. So if we have version 1.1, we can critique that development of 1.1 based on what we have done in 1.0. We can, in standards, every standard requirement or normative, it has its own unique identity. And if you assemble all of this together, you have what we call the static conformance requirements, which is for the different features that's been supported in the standards, is that feature mandatory or optional? And if it's mandatory or optional, what are the other features that are inside you need to concatenate in order to obtain that functionality? The tools, they can go as long as they have the the logic on how to combine and create these static conformal requirements. The tools, they can go and build that for you. Before, they used to take, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks of one standards engineer working really hard for 3 or 4 hours a day during 3 or 4 weeks to then go to the meeting, present to the members, and find that something was missing. With these systems, you can get the first draft in a matter of a minute. And from there, the group now, they have a starting point where they can elaborate. It's endless. Every single, I tried, this is one of the things I try to do now, is to see how the AI can assist on my work. I haven't find any task or operation that I cannot be assisted by AI. And this is just the beginning. We are going to see more and more development in not only in the standards but across the board. So we are going to find ourselves like a cyborg, where suddenly you have felt that you are enhanced, and that can be is good, but it's dangerous, because if we rely on AI to tell us everything, AI suffers hallucinations, and from time to time they really tell you something is not right, and you need to have the understanding to say oops. So for me, the way I use it is to create the first draft, is to give me the first, and there is nothing more intimidating than face a piece of paper in blank and you need to build something from scratch. But with AI, you build your knowledge base specifically for that organization, specifically for that project, specifically for that version. And now you have that assistance of, a specialized entity next to you that can help you to build a lot of the documentation and processes and potential drafts that you can later present to the group. So it's an enhancement, and definitely it's there already. It's a reality, and we are going to see over the next months and years. It's going to change the way we work. No, I have no doubt about that.
Yeah, definitely. And as we're talking about basically how the future of standards development organizations will look like, are there any other trends that you see that will influence the operation of these institutes?
And this is a very personal view, but I I look to the success of GitHub, how the developers in this, they are always very keen to do everything just with the fingers and the keyboard and do everything through the command line. And I try to figure out what it will be the equivalent from the standards and what should be the platform that we can build around the needs from the standards that allows the developer, or in this case the standards engineer, to do everything they need just by combining information. And there are some challenges that represent the standards where you try to, as I mentioned before, bring all these different stakeholders with very different views together. And around that challenges, I'm personally building a platform that I believe is going to help us to address some of those challenges. Because going forward, standards, it cannot last 2 years before it hits the market. You need real-time collaboration. You need things to move faster. You need I wouldn't say to send a standards that is incorrect, but we will see how the standards is going to be more in alignment with the problems in the market. There is a real a series of pain points. Out of those pain points, we need to address three of them that are key. And we need a standards for tomorrow to address that. And then the other ones that we will be addressing with time. We will need this level of response. Standards normally takes a year, 2 years and a half, even more. To build our standards, we should be building standards every 6 months. If you think about software, they are doing constantly the deployments and enhancements. With the standards, a little bit different, because obviously it's not a platform that you change the platform and, the functionality now works according with that, or you change the API. Well, if you change the API, it's going to be more messy, but the standards is there is a process of develop the specifications, then from those specifications, someone convert that into some digital component. That process is coming together. It's going to be shortened. So what's happening is that from standards to development is going to come together, and from there to cover the needs of the market. And for that, we need new platforms, digital platforms that allow us to collaborate together in a way that eliminate all these problems that we have now. I do not have access to these resources. Oh, my company doesn't allow me to use this particular platform. Or, what is the latest baseline? I'm using one, and now I realize that this is you are discussing some documents that are already changed from what I have. How I can get that? All of these are problems that nowadays the industry can resolve, and we should really have that platform on there. On top of that, you have still the problems of collaboration and coming together, But even those problems can be facilitated by saying, okay, your company is now a member of this organization. You join at this level. As a result of joining at this level, you have some limitations, and those limitations are built already when you access to the information. For example, and that it depends on the policies of the company. But some companies say, you can view the documents, but you cannot write. And that is one limitation they established to a certain level of members. So to try to implement this nowadays with the tools that we have, borrow here, take there, add here, copy there, is a nightmare. And all of that is delaying the process. Where we should say one company join, and immediately anyone in that company, if they join as a members, they have access to all the resources and they can perform that operations. And by the way to operate in that standards or in that group is so intuitive that you understand. And if you don't know something, you go and query the system to tell me how I can create, how I can modify this at this stage. And just landing in this group, I don't know where they are, but I see I have this problem here and I want to address this problem, or I have this new feature. How I can do that? Right now, it's organizations in the past, they used to have standards teams. They provide training. They teach them how to collaborate, how to, go through this flow of information. Nowadays, companies, they don't have that. The large majority of companies, the standards, if they have one upon a time a standards group, that standards group has been incorporated into other departments. And now you have people, they go there and say, my boss told me that I have only 5% of my time to deliver all these requirements. How am I going to do it? And I get into this amount of discussion that they don't know which tools they're going to use. They don't know where is the document. I don't know where I can find this other piece of information. All of this needs to come together in a very intuitive way, that you don't need to go into training or do a degree in order to be able to collaborate in that organization. It's something easy to do. That is the challenge that I think it has. In particular standards, it can apply to other industries, but in particular standards. And the technology, the good news is that technology is to a point where that solutions can be provided.
Yeah, that's great. And I agree that would be really amazing if this time frame that and this all time that you dedicate to developing standards can be kind of shortened, and you should also invest less efforts into development of this. But also there is one thing, one question that I really wanted to cover kind of separately, and you briefly mentioned it at the very beginning. And this question is kind of connected to the future as well, because innovation is the future. But I want to specifically talk about influence of standards on the innovation process. You were talking about that standards are enablers for the innovation.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is a good question. Some people think the standards is innovation. Standards is not innovation. Innovation is where companies they go and differentiate themselves. Innovation is where companies they bring something to the market that is different, and you don't want to go and kill that innovation. You don't want to standardize innovation. What you need to standardize is the platform where companies can innovate, and they don't need to dedicate time to maintain some protocol stack that is needed but is not making a difference. Is going back to the rail track. Is that rail track between cities? No one is, you go to the train station, you buy a service to go from one city to the other, or to send a cargo from one city to the other, or go, in a leisurely trip. You don't go there to buy a piece of the rail track. But if the rail track is not there, the trains, they're not going to move. But as I say, no one, in fact, in some countries, the rail track is being given to a third party to maintain, which is always underfunded because no one wants to spend money on that. But if you don't have a solid rail track, you don't have services. So it's the uncool thing is the things you need to standardize. Innovation is leave it free. Leave the companies to innovate, to differentiate, to bring to the market products that are needed, and they make an impact, a difference. And normally what's happening when companies are innovating is that sometimes they need to build the whole product stack because they don't have, in order to deliver the service, they don't have some components. And very quickly, all the companies come along and they find exactly the same problem. In order to deliver that particular service, we need to build all this protocol stack. And to make things more challenging is that when these companies or these services, they need to interoperate because they have different protocol stack, may not interoperate. Straight away is when you say, that is the things we need to standardize. Only that components that allows this traffic, this information to get there, but there is no real value in the differentiation is in the service, is no on that protocol stack. Sometimes companies, they don't understand that. They go into the standards and they want to embed it their product, and that creates a lot of frictions, a lot of problems. And normally what's happening is that the concept of the standard, which is let's go to build these minimum features that we need in order to allow interoperation or in order to allow the market, now is being added a plethora of different optionalities that is making things foggy and unclear and difficult, and that should not happen. But unfortunately, some companies they try, and that is when you ending with the standards. They are very heavy, takes too long, is full of optionalities. A standard should not be too many optionalities, and if there is an optionality, it's because you want to very clearly differentiate. But once you have this optionality inside of that, it should be everything pretty much mandatory, because you want, from the interoperability point of view, that you are not going to have problems. So wherever you have innovation, standards will come later, because innovation is say, okay, we build the services, fantastic, but now we have to maintain all of this. There is no real value in terms of the make a difference. We cannot charge for this, and all the companies will have exactly the same problem. And now is when you say, okay, we innovate, now let's go to take that component and standardize it, which is the correct way to do things. But at the beginning, to innovate, yeah, a lot of times companies they build everything they need in order to provide that service.
Thank you so much for such interesting answers. But the last question that I have, the very last one, about your plans for the future. You were talking about this platform that you are building for SDOs. Anything else in your mind?
Yeah. I have had my problem is probably I have too many ideas and projects running right now that difficult to implement. But I'm working as a program manager right now for some organizations. I see the pain points. I see the issues, the problems that we have. Sometimes the members they don't realize, but I see in order to bring all these companies together, in order to facilitate the work, you see the level of support that is needed. Nowadays, try to do a support by adding people is challenging, it's costly, it requires training, it requires everyone interpret it differently, and introduce a step that things is slowing down. What we want to do is give the power to the members. The members are the ones they understand the technology, are the ones they should be able to create a blog about that particular technology, discuss it among there, and publish it themselves. The members is the ones they should be able to go and figure out how to build or the next features, how to take some of the previous specifications and see how we can elaborate those in order to add some new features and create and don't need the assistance of a person like me in the process. I'm trying to basically redundant myself by bringing that knowledge into a platform, and the technology nowadays is to that point allow us to do it. And the problem I find is that you need to have an end-to-end solution in order to go to the customer and say, okay, here you have this tool allows you to do all the different aspects that you need in terms of collaboration, in terms of access, in terms of resolve, resolution of problems, in order to even get ideas or get information about the process. All of that, unless you have an end-to-end solution, organizations they say, okay, yeah, but I like this. It's like I have a motorway, a freeway, and it's already built, but you are missing the tunnels and you are missing the bridges. And each time they go to the level where you need to go to the tunnel, they need to get out of the freeway for a normal road and back. No one like that. And they want to have an end-to-end solution. An end-to-end solution takes time, money, and is challenging. It's full of challenges. But that is where I believe that it will make a difference to the organizations where you give the power to the members. And because nowadays we don't have standards engineers in the way we used to have before, those people, they should have the tools and the environment where they can figure out the next step without you being there supporting them. That challenging nowadays is possible to do thanks to AI and all the knowledge base that we have built over the years. And I think it's a very exciting time to be in this industry, despite of all the changes they have been on the last few years, and the changes are coming because the need for the standards will be there more and more, but the nature of that standards is going to dramatically change, and we will go to at the point we are doing standardization faster with better collaboration, much more focused to the needs of the market in a way that we have done over the last 20 or 30 years, which is slow, red tape, requires sometimes people very knowledgeable about the process itself. All of that is nowadays, that is not possible. So you need to find other ways of working that they still bring you the collaboration, the resolution, and time to market, and done by the same people. They are developing the standards, and even the promotion and everything. It's when I was starting working in standards, and nowadays some of the organizations they still have marketing departments, but nowadays more and more organizations they still need marketing, but they have not the ability to have a full-time person working in marketing. But as you very well know, there are tools on there that can assist with that. So if you build those processes, those tools with that knowledge base, you can support the standards in a way that we could not do it even 2 years ago. So it's very exciting time in a way.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah. Thank you so much, Joaquin, for all the answers, for all this information. It was a very interesting conversation, I believe, and I learned a lot of new things. I really appreciate your time, and I admire you and your passion that you have for what you do. So thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity, and well, I hope that it has been at least useful for some people to see some of these comments. I'm happy to, if anyone has any question, I'm always happy to make myself available to provide any answer that if I know.
Yes, yes. I will definitely share the details and your contact details, where they can find you, and just, maybe send a message to you with some questions. But yeah, thank you so much again. And I wish you good luck with all your endeavors. And I wish you a great day.
Thank you very much, Liz. Thank you.
Yeah.
Take care then.